All right, back here at 98.5 The Sports Hub of Joe Murray. All this free agency talk in the NFL. I need a break. So you know what we do? We talk about the Celtics. And we talk to someone who covers the team. And his name is Bobby Manning. And he works over at CLNS. We've had a CLNS takeover tonight. We had Taylor on earlier tonight. Now we got Bobby Manning here. What's up, Bobby? How you doing?
What's going on, Joe? Big night for CLNS around here. I love it.
You guys do a solid job. You do a solid job as well. Just wanted to get into this 5-game road trip that they went through. I mean, 3-2 overall looks pretty good. But for the most part, would you say it was a successful road trip?
No, I think they came out even. You go 3-2, not exactly 500, but you come out even out of this one because you take care of business against the teams you should beat. But you run into some crunch time trouble against potentially the second-best team in the East in Cleveland, and a damage one at that in that game, a huge blown lead, and crunch time concerns that kind of linger with this team. And then you face the standard in the league in Denver and come up short there as well, trail throughout much of that game. So I would not call it a success. I think there's more you want to see from this team. I've kind of held out throughout this season, wanting to see a little bit more from them in terms of are they going to win a championship. But you take care of business as they have for most of this year. You're down, resting a bunch of guys. I think that was all good stuff. But you wanted to see a little bit more on the front end, I think, and that left a little bit more to be desired.
Yeah, and listen, I don't think they were that far away. Like, they lost on a last-second shot to Cleveland, and granted, you can be critical of Jayson Tatum and wasting the 19 seconds in Missoula for the timeout. But against Denver, they came back. They had a shot, they missed a shot, and you can be critical of Tatum missing that shot. But, I don't know, I just don't consider it a fail. I know on national television it looks like that, but it just shows you that they're that close, Bobby. So the way that they bounce back, even on a back-to-back with their bench performing, I think that was kind of one of the most positive things from that road trip. Yeah,
definitely. There were positives for sure, but after losing the first game against Denver, you want to see them come through in that situation. And listen, I didn't think the issue in that game was the way they guard Jokic. I thought the defense was fine in that game. You hold Denver to 115. That's not bad necessarily, but the offense in that game, a little bit dysfunctional, I thought at times. And Jalen was great in that game. I think Jalen's on a tear right now, so that's one of the positives you'll take from the road trip as well. I mean, he's starting to approach All-NBA territory with the way he's coming out of the All-Star break here. But Tatum in that game, surprising showing, a little bit of an aberration. Now, he didn't shoot well for much of the trip until that last game yesterday. But in that game, it wasn't just the lack of shooting to me that was tough to watch. It was, him getting beat on the back line out of rotation against Gordon, him only having 4 or 5 rebounds in that game, not impacting with the facilitating the way he has for much of the year with the 5 turnovers there. So him getting taken out of that game almost, it looked like emotionally to me was the most concerning thing there. You have a bad shooting game. I like when he stays aggressive, but in that game he only took 15 shots. So he got a little passive in terms of shooting the ball there too. So he's got to come up bigger in that matchup because if that is the finals, Joe, it's there's a lot of different pieces to it, but it is largely going to come down to Jokic versus Tatum and who has a better series there. So that's why I think myself and a lot of others look at Denver and say they're the favorites. They have the best player in the league. They have the most consistent player in the league, and a guy who did it last year against a fairly tough road there. So that's the only. It's not a fail. It's not a massive disappointment. But to come out of the season 0-2 against the team that you're potentially going up against in June, I think is a little bit of a disappointment.
All right, I'll get to Tatum in a minute here, but I at least feel like the last few games, the last 3 games, they've been down players, but yet Luke Cornett and Sam Hauser have played very well. Does it feel like these guys need to be a part of the rotation for things to go well for this team in the long run?
One of them does. I think when you get to the playoffs, if you're healthy, you're going to need one of those guys to step up. And how are they going to do it? Where are they going to fit in? Is it going to be a different guy every night? I think that's one of the questions going into the playoffs. Now, they've all played well in spots this year. I like how Hauser's shot for a lot of the year. He's gotten to different spots on the floor to score from too when guys are attacking his closeouts. He's actually taken a step this year, compared to someone I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit here in Grant, who, after that big year he had in 2022, got run off the line and really struggled the next year. So he's probably the most likely candidate just because of the size. He can stay in front of guys. I think Pritchard, as much as there's a lot of conversation about him getting hunted, his isolation number is actually really good this year. I think opponents only shooting 0.54 points per possession against him when they isolate him, so that's a really good number. For him, it's more just the shooting consistency. There's nights, and I think he had one in that Phoenix game, I want to say, where he or the Denver game, rather, where he just really wasn't there from the field at all. So that's going to be a challenge for him. And then Cornette has been a little bit of a revelation for them this year, but you do have two centers in front of him, so can you play two centers at a time with him out there? I thought they did that really well with Tillman last night in him, but the Horford and Al combination hasn't been great. I thought that really struggled in one of the games early in the trip, the Cleveland one. And then, your Porzingis Horford one, you can probably lean on that. I think that's plus 13 this year, and then maybe play Cornette like one rotation behind those guys. So it's going to be 6-7 guys, come playoff time, and you're really going to have a minimal amount of bench presence in that spot. The question you have is, does Horford miss a game in the playoffs? Does Porzingis miss a game in the playoffs? I think that's actually more likely than not. Can Cornette come in and give you 20 good minutes in a playoff game if that happens? That's kind of what you're asking out of this bench. If they have to give you one 15-minute stretch out of those guys, I think that's enough from them, and I think they're capable of that.
All right, we'll talk about Bobby Manning from CLNS, covers the Celtics for them. A lot of talk about Jayson Tatum slumping. 38 points last night, ho-hum. But Derek White, his shot struggled. He finally got down last night at 7 threes, really bounced back. What do you attribute to some of his struggles, and has he been just shouldering the load with all the injuries that you mentioned?
He can be erratic as a shooter sometimes. The numbers on the whole are really good in Boston so far, but you remember that first year he was here, it was more up and down. So I think he'll go through the hot stretches, the cold stretches, much like Tatum does from deep. They're both good shooters, but you have your slow stretches and then you have your hot stretches, and 7 for 11 is about as hot as you can get out there. That's a big part of his game, but it's really everything with him this year, and he honestly stacks up. I think Brown's going to get some of the All-NBA love on the lower end of the roster. Tatum's kind of the slam dunk, but White analytically is right up there with any of the guys you'd mention in those spots, and he's not going to get it because he's only scoring 15 points a game. But when you consider the defense, the shot blocking, the passing, he was so great passing the ball last night. There was the best lob on the team, super efficient inside and out. That floater he's getting to now has really looked good, and I honestly want to see more of him, Joe. I think Tatum runs about 6 pick and rolls a game. White's more around 4, so he's second on the roster. But I think their ball time could even out a little bit more. And you saw last night, too. Tatum was getting into some of the screens and rolling. That, to me, is an easier spot for him to score out of. It puts him closer to the basket. It still kind of puts guys in a bind in terms of who you're going to, guard out of those screens. And White, just to me, is the most sound decision maker on the team. He only averages 1.6 turnovers a game. He always makes the right play, it feels like. He can be aggressive with the ball in his hands if he has it more. But he's, and we've talked about this in the past, a guy who's going to step back and let other guys do things more. He can sometimes be a little passive, and he's gotten much more aggressive as his Boston tenure's gone on. But that's one thing I'd like to see from Joe, and Joe actually talked about it a little bit last night, having White as a pick-and-roll ball handler more often. I think he has great chemistry with Porzingis when he's out there. I think it can put Tatum off the ball a little bit in spots to succeed, because you saw it in the Denver game when teams really blitz Tatum to get him off the ball. It can be disruptive to his rhythm and shot totals and just how involved he is in the game. So they got to put Tatum in different spots to succeed, and you really have this luxury in White and to some degree Holiday too, as these great on-ball playmakers that you can utilize more often than I feel like this team does.
Jayson Tatum, since the All-Star break, shooting 44% from 3. So for those who think he's slumping, his three-point shot has gotten better, and I think he's been challenged of late. Like, yes, their competition was very good over the last few games, right? But now the competition gets a little bit less. How do you think they handle this? And do you think Tatum will be somebody that will sit out? Maybe the MVP chatter is slowed down a bit, but do you think that they monitor his minutes late?
Yeah, I think they inevitably will. I was surprised he actually played on the second half of the back-to-back there, but maybe they're targeting Sunday in D.C. as a rest night there. That would make some sense, especially if, his concern there is giving the visiting, crowd there a show. I think it's going to be mostly Celtics fans there in D.C. and, as it has been in a lot of other spots this year. But, that's not really a marquee game, probably a game that they can win without him. And, I don't know how many wins you really need to close this thing out when you're up 9-10 games. So I think it is the time of year to rest. I think it's the time of year to experiment. I liked how they got into some different lineups late last night. Sat Tatum down for a long stretch to be in the fourth, but then he came back in the late stages there, which I thought was strange. Got some shots off, so I guess you find a little bit of a rhythm there after struggling to shoot early in the road trip. But you got to, and he's talked about it before too, he doesn't want to sit out. There's always the arguments with Brad because they want him to sit out more than he does. He's only taken 3 nights off all year, and he's always playing big minutes. So I think that's a credit to him because there's so many stars in the league who don't do that, and he's super durable and he's able to handle that. But at the same time, you want to be fresh, you want to be ready for the playoffs. I hope there's going to be some opportunities down the stretch, not only to get him the rest, but also just see some other guys, see what you have, mix and match lineups. It's the perfect time to do that. They have the easiest schedule by far remaining in the league right now. I think it's like a 42 win percentage. So it's past time to do that. I think it will start coming. Porzingis has taken 4 nights in a row now. He's out tomorrow. Brown takes his night off with the back there. Horford, the back-to-backs. He's done a great job managing everybody else. Your best player, though, has to be fresh going into the playoffs. And I'm sure part of those shooting struggles is a little bit of fatigue.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you there. All right, man. Well, what else you guys got going on in CLNS? How are you wrapping up the rest of this regular season?
Well, I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Should be a good game. Sun's big three is fairly healthy, and they've been on the road forever. I didn't go on this trip, so I'm looking forward to getting back in the Garden and being around the guys a little bit more there, seeing what's going on, talking to Joe. We do a post-game show, as you know, Joe, after every game, so check that out, CLNS Media. And our Celtics channel is Celtics All Access on YouTube, so check that out as well.
All right, Bobby, you do a great job, my man. Appreciate you joining us here, and we'll talk before the playoffs.
Thank you, Joe. Look forward to it.
You got it. He's Bobby Manning. Check out all his work, CLNSmedia.com. He does the post game, does the interviews, Joe Mazzulla as well, and does a solid job. Him and Taylor Kyles, they do a really good job. One football, one Celtics. And all those guys are welcome right here on 98.5 The Sports Hub. All right, we're going to take a look at the headlines. Let me get you caught up on everything. There's been a lot going on tonight. Cookies, I don't know who they're from.
I mean, there's a chance there's more stuff out there for you. We just don't know.
We don't know yet.